China's Chang'e 6 lunar probe has returned to Earth, bringing with it samples from the unexplored far side of the moon.
For decades, the far side of the moon remained a silent mystery, hidden from human eyes and unreachable by direct radio contact.
Moon landing, you're not a... You believe in the moon landing, right?
I used to believe in the moon landing.
You don't anymore?
I think there is a less than zero possibility that we do not go to the moon.
Every attempt to study it, fleeting flybys, partial scans, or brief snapshots had failed. Then, a subtle shift in approach began to break that barrier.
China has launched an unprecedented mission to retrieve samples from the far side of the moon.
Engineers solved a problem that had stumped generations, creating a path where none existed. What followed changed how the world views lunar exploration and revealed just how far the U.S. has fallen behind. Exploring Moon's far side. In 2019, a Chinese spacecraft descended through dust and shadow and landed inside the von Karman crater. With that landing, Chang'e 4 became the first mission to achieve a soft touchdown on the far side of the moon.
China is already making history. China's Xinhua news agency has reported that the country's Chang'e 4 lunar probe has just landed on the far side of the moon. But this is the first ever landing by any country on that side of the moon that's never visible from Earth.
Reaching this region required solving a long-standing problem: communication. Radio signals travel in straight lines, and the moon blocks them completely. Once a spacecraft moves beyond the lunar edge, direct contact with Earth is lost. Earlier missions, including the Soviet Luna 3 in 1959, managed only brief flybys, sending back a few low-quality images before communication ended. A lander and a rover meant to operate for long periods needed a continuous, stable link. Chinese engineers addressed this by changing how the problem was approached. If Earth could not maintain contact with the far side, then an intermediary would be required to bridge the gap. The solution was to place a relay satellite in a position where it could see both Earth and the Moon's hidden hemisphere simultaneously. This location was the Earth-Moon L2 Lagrange point, about 65,000 kilometers beyond the Moon, where gravitational forces allow a spacecraft to remain in a stable orbit around both bodies. From this point, a satellite could serve as a constant communications link. That satellite, named Queqiao, launched on May 21, 2018. The name, meaning Magpie Bridge, referred to a folktale about a bridge spanning the sky to connect separated sides. After a 24-day journey, Queqiao entered a controlled halo orbit around the L2 point, becoming the first communications relay deployed there. Once its 4.2-meter antenna unfolded, the Moon's far side could maintain continuous contact with Earth. With the relay in place, Chang'e 4 began its mission. The spacecraft consisted of a stationary lander and a rover called U-22. Their target lay within the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest and oldest impact regions in the solar system. The basin spans roughly 2,500 kilometers and reaches depths of up to 13 kilometers, the result of a massive collision early in the Moon's history. Within this basin sits the von Karman crater, the chosen landing site. On January 3, 2019, the lander descended autonomously. It slowed its fall, hovered above the surface, and scanned the ground for hazards before selecting a safe landing point. Throughout the final phase, mission controllers on Earth relied on Queqiao for updates. Upon confirmation, the landing was officially declared successful. Images sent back from the surface showed a terrain unlike the near side seen in earlier missions. Instead of broad, smooth plains, the far side appeared rougher and more heavily cratered. A full panoramic view revealed a gray landscape densely marked by small craters, reflecting an older, less altered surface.
The lunar probe and the rover have now taken pictures of each other and sent the photos back to Earth.
Shortly after landing, U-22 rolled down from the lander and began moving across the terrain. Weighing about 140 kilograms and traveling on 6 wheels, it became the first rover to operate on the Moon's far side. Among its instruments was the visible and near-infrared spectrometer, which examined sunlight reflected from the surface to identify minerals. This tool allowed scientists to study the local geology in detail without collecting samples. The data produced notable results. Analysis revealed the presence of olivine and low-calcium pyroxene, minerals typically associated with planetary mantles. Scientists had long proposed that the impact that formed the South Pole Aitken Basin was powerful enough to expose deep material from within the Moon. Until Chang'e 4, there had been no direct surface evidence to support this idea. Further studies suggested that the material detected by U-22 likely did not originate directly beneath the von Karman crater. Instead, it was probably ejected by a later impact from a nearby crater, Vincennes, which excavated deeper layers of the basin floor and scattered them across the region. Chang'e 4 had landed within this redistributed material. These findings provided valuable insight into the Moon's internal structure and its early formation. They also helped refine models of how large impacts shape rocky bodies throughout the solar system. Researchers noted that such results could guide future missions aimed at returning samples from the far side. Beyond geology, the mission included a small biological experiment. A sealed container carried cotton seeds, potato seeds, yeast, and fruit fly eggs. After landing, the cotton seeds sprouted, marking the first instance of biological growth on the lunar surface. The plants did not survive the extreme cold of the lunar night, but the experiment showed that growth could begin under lunar conditions. The far side also offered a unique environment for radio science. Shielded from Earth's constant radio emissions, it is the quietest radio region in the inner solar system. Instruments on both the lander and the Queqiao satellite monitored low-frequency radio waves to search for faint signals from the early universe. The mission included international contributions as well. Instruments from Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Saudi Arabia supported studies of radiation, solar-wind interaction, and surface conditions, all of which are important for long-term exploration. Chang'e 4 was designed for limited operations, with a planned lifespan of 1 year for the lander and 3 months for the rover. Both exceeded those expectations by a wide margin. Years later, they continued to function, and U-22 had traveled nearly 2 kilometers, setting a record for the longest operating lunar rover. Long before this mission, however, another nation had already crossed a different boundary and achieved what once seemed impossible. Man on the Moon. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy set a clear national objective. The United States would land a man on the Moon before the end of the decade. The goal was technically uncertain, but it provided a single direction that shaped every major decision in the American space program. Meeting that objective required a level of coordination never attempted before. Engineers, scientists, pilots, and planners were brought together under the Apollo program, which at its peak involved roughly 400,000 people and more than 20,000 companies and universities. This network supported the development of the Saturn V rocket, a launch vehicle more than 360 feet tall, designed to send crews beyond Earth orbit and sustain a journey to the Moon. Each Saturn V launch represented years of testing and preparation. When Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins lifted off, the rocket carried not only 3 astronauts but the combined effort of an entire program focused on a single outcome. That outcome was reached on July 20th, 1969. When Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, humans made their first direct contact with another world, completing the primary objective set 8 years earlier. The activities on the Moon followed a strict plan. Armstrong and Aldrin raised the American flag as a marker of accomplishment rather than as a symbol of possession. They deployed instruments to study seismic activity in the solar wind, collected 47.5 pounds of rock and soil, and left a plaque stating that the mission was conducted in peace for all mankind. With the first landing complete, later missions expanded the scope of exploration. Apollo 12 demonstrated improved landing accuracy, while Apollo 14 increased the scientific workload. Apollo 15 introduced the lunar roving vehicle, allowing astronauts to travel several miles from their landing site and examine a broader range of terrain. Apollo 16 focused on the lunar highlands, and Apollo 17 included geologist Harrison Schmitt, bringing specialized field expertise to the surface. Across all missions, 12 astronauts walked on the Moon and spent more than 300 hours there. They returned with 842 pounds of lunar material, which provided new insight into the Moon's formation and early history. At the same time, images of Earth taken from lunar orbit showed the planet as a small and isolated world, influencing how many viewed Earth's place in space. The Apollo program concluded in December 1972 when Apollo 17 departed the Moon. With that mission, human activity on the lunar surface came to an end. Exploration continued without crews. During the 1990s and early 2000s, robotic missions such as Clementine and Lunar Prospector mapped the Moon. They identified signs of water ice in permanently shadowed craters near the poles. This work was extended in 2009 by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Flying close to the surface, it produced detailed maps, photographed Apollo landing sites and rover tracks, and identified terrain and resources relevant to future missions.
We have some of the most stunning images of the lunar surface that I've ever seen. These are pictures of the Apollo 17, Apollo 14, and Apollo 12 landing sites.
Despite these advances, no humans returned for decades. That long pause ended in 2022, when the United States began a new effort to return to the Moon, opening another chapter in lunar exploration. Artemis and its hurdles. More than 50 years after the last Apollo mission left the Moon, the United States began planning a return. This effort was not aimed at brief visits, but at establishing a sustained human presence that could support future exploration and eventual missions to Mars. That plan became the Artemis program. Its objectives included landing the first woman and the first person of color on the Moon, and sending crews to the lunar South Pole, a region never visited by humans. The South Pole contains permanently shadowed craters thought to hold water ice, a resource that could support fuel production, oxygen supply, and long-term life support. From the start, Artemis was structured as a cooperative program, led by NASA and supported by international partners and commercial space companies. This broader approach brought added complexity. From its early stages, Artemis faced technical, financial, political, and organizational challenges that slowed progress and placed pressure on schedules. Despite these obstacles, the program continued to advance, though often with limited flexibility. Artemis was designed as a series of missions, with each step intended to prepare for the next. The first of these missions was Artemis 1, completed in late 2022. An uncrewed Orion spacecraft launched aboard the Space Launch System, traveled around the Moon, and returned safely to Earth. The flight demonstrated that the core systems could operate in deep space and withstand re-entry at lunar return speeds. The next mission, Artemis 2, is planned to carry astronauts for the first time. 4 crew members are expected to travel around the Moon, allowing engineers to evaluate Orion's life support systems, navigation, and overall performance with humans on board.
I'm here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and as you can see, work is well underway for our next mission to the Moon, both on land and off the coast.
This mission serves as the transition between uncrewed testing and surface landings. Artemis 3 represents the program's central goal. It is intended to return astronauts to the lunar surface for the first time since 1972, landing near the South Pole using a commercially provided human landing system. Success here would confirm that the program can move beyond test flights and into sustained surface operations. Beyond that point, Artemis aims to assemble the Gateway Lunar Space Station, establish a base camp on the Moon, and build operational experience for future Mars missions. Each of these elements depends on the readiness of the others, making the overall architecture sensitive to delays in any single component. Timeline changes have become a recurring issue. In early 2024, NASA announced that Artemis II had been delayed to September 2025, with Artemis III moving no earlier than September 2026. These changes reflected the accumulation of unresolved technical issues rather than a single setback. One of the main contributors was the Orion spacecraft. Analysis after Artemis I revealed unexpected erosion and cracking in parts of the heat shield. Although the vehicle returned safely, engineers required a clearer understanding of the behavior before committing to crewed flights, which led to redesigns and extended testing. Orion's life support systems caused additional delays. Components planned for Artemis II failed acceptance testing, affecting systems directly related to crew safety. Resolving these problems required disassembly, repair, and repeated qualification tests. Orion is only one part of the larger Artemis system. The program relies on multiple partners, and delays in one area affect all others. Two of the most critical dependencies are the human landing system and the lunar spacesuits needed for surface work. NASA selected SpaceX to develop the human landing system for Artemis III using a modified Starship vehicle. This choice reflected NASA's decision to purchase landing services from a commercial provider rather than build the lander itself. The Starship-based system introduces added complexity. It depends on in-orbit refueling, which requires multiple tanker launches to fully fuel a single lander before it can travel to the Moon. This process has not yet been demonstrated in operational conditions, and estimates suggest that one landing could require 10 or more successful launches. This approach ties Artemis to a development model that accepts frequent test failures along the way. While effective for rapid development, it creates tension with the strict safety standards required for human spaceflight. At the same time, NASA's new lunar spacesuits are being developed by Axiom Space. These suits must operate in extreme cold, handle uneven terrain, and support extended surface activity near the South Pole. Any delay in suit readiness directly affects landing timelines. Beyond technical hurdles, Artemis faces sustained budget pressure. Funding levels are determined by congressional decisions that do not always align with NASA's planning needs. For fiscal year 2025, proposed funding increases did not entirely keep pace with inflation and remained below requested levels. Lawmakers also required continued funding for the Space Launch System and Orion at existing levels, limiting NASA's ability to redirect resources to later Artemis elements. This preserved established programs, but reduced flexibility across the broader architecture. NASA officials have described the resulting situation as a structural funding gap. Within a fixed budget, the agency must balance costs by delaying, reducing, or restructuring interconnected components. The Gateway Lunar Space Station has been particularly affected by these constraints. Gateway is central to Artemis's international partnerships, with contributions from Europe, Japan, Canada, and others. Changes to Gateway plans risk affecting not only mission design, but also international commitments. Underlying these challenges is a broader change in how the United States approaches space exploration. Unlike Apollo, Artemis is not entirely government-built or government-managed. NASA now acts as both coordinator and customer, relying on private companies with independent schedules and priorities. This structure encourages innovation but shifts responsibility and risk. That shift became more visible in late 2024 when NASA's acting administrator indicated that the agency might open competition for the Artemis III lander contract. The statement showed the program's growing urgency. External timelines also shape that urgency. China has announced plans to land astronauts on the Moon by 2030, placing additional pressure on America's pace. And while the moon race heats up, a new arena of competition has already been occupied in Earth orbit. Space's Heavenly Palace. In November 2022, China completed its own space station and secured an independent, continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. The station, called Tiangong, marked the first time China operated a fully self-reliant orbital platform without reliance on Western systems. Tiangong, which translates to Heavenly Palace, was designed, built, launched, and operated entirely within China's space program. In its completed form, the station has a clear T-shaped structure with a total mass of about 100 metric tons. It measures roughly 55 meters in length, while its large solar arrays stretch nearly 39 meters from end to end. Inside, the station provides about 340 cubic meters of pressurized volume. Of that space, 122 cubic meters are dedicated to crew living and working areas. Chinese engineers have described this step as a shift from a single-room layout to a multi-room orbital home, reflecting a focus on more extended stays and regular crew rotation. At the center of Tiangong is the Chang'e core module. Weighing about 22,000 kilograms and measuring 16.6 meters long, Tiangong functions as the station's command center, propulsion hub, and main living space. Built from 5A06 aluminum alloy for durability and fatigue resistance, it houses life support systems that recycle urine into drinking water and contains the propulsion systems used to maintain orbit. Tiangong exists because China had no alternative. Due to U.S. legislation known as the Wolf Amendment, China was excluded from participation in the International Space Station. Building its own station became the only way to sustain a long-term human spaceflight program. With the ISS approaching the end of its service life, Tiangong ensures China avoids a gap in orbital capability. Even so, Tiangong is significantly smaller than the International Space Station. The ISS has been continuously inhabited since 2000 and stretches about 109 meters from end to end. It weighs more than 450 metric tons and contains roughly 13,700 cubic feet of pressurized volume. Designed for 6 to 7 astronauts, it has hosted as many as 13 at a time and supports a wide range of research fields through systems refined over decades. By comparison, Tiangong spans about 55 meters, weighs between 70 and 100 metric tons, and offers roughly 3,800 cubic feet of habitable space. It usually supports a crew of 3. Unlike the ISS, which grew through years of modular expansion, Tiangong was launched as a tightly integrated system on a compressed schedule. The ISS is also governed by complex international agreements involving the United States, Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada. Major decisions require coordination and compromise across multiple governments. This structure provides resilience, but also slows response when problems arise. Technically, the ISS remains the more capable platform due to its size and redundancy. However, long-term human spaceflight is defined not only by routine operations, but by how systems respond when something goes wrong. That reality confronted China in late 2025 during the most serious in-orbit incident in its crewed spaceflight history. The issue emerged during a routine crew rotation in early November. The Shenzhou 20 crew, aboard the station since April, was preparing to return to Earth as their replacements arrived on Shenzhou 21. During standard inspections, engineers detected a small triangular crack in the outer layer of a viewport window on the Shenzhou 20 return capsule. The most likely cause was an impact from a tiny piece of orbital debris moving at high speed. Under the heat and stress of re-entry, the crack could spread, threatening the capsule's structural integrity. Mission Control determined the spacecraft was no longer safe for crewed return. Shenzhou 20 was grounded, preventing a potentially fatal re-entry. That decision solved one problem, but created another. The only other crew-rated spacecraft docked to Tiangong was Shenzhou 21, which had just arrived. Controllers made a rapid adjustment. The outgoing crew transferred into Shenzhou 21 and returned safely to Earth on November 14th. This solution left the newly arrived astronauts, Zhang Lu, Fu Wei, and Zhang Hongjiang, aboard the station without a guaranteed emergency return vehicle. For the first time, China faced the possibility of astronauts temporarily stranded in orbit. China's response was immediate. The China Manned Space Agency maintains a fully prepared backup rocket and Shenzhou spacecraft at the Jiuquan Launch Center for precisely this scenario. engineers activated contingency procedures and prepared an uncrewed rescue mission, Shenzhou 22. A process that usually takes about 45 days was completed in just 16. A similar situation unfolded in the United States, despite its far larger orbital infrastructure. In June 2024, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams launched to the ISS aboard Boeing's CST-100 Starliner on its first crewed test flight. The mission was planned to last around 8 days. During approach and docking, engineers detected multiple issues, including malfunctioning thrusters and helium leaks in the propulsion system. Although Starliner docked successfully, engineers could not confirm that it would perform safely during deorbit and re-entry. After extended analysis, NASA concluded that returning the astronauts aboard the spacecraft carried too much risk. The ISS itself could support the astronauts without difficulty. What it could not do was restore confidence in the vehicle meant to bring them home. NASA chose to return Starliner without a crew and reassigned Wilmore and Williams to a standard station expedition. What began as a short test flight became a stay of roughly 9 months, ending only when seats became available on a future SpaceX Crew Dragon mission. The contrast between these two incidents shows differences in structure and response. China's program, operating without international coordination or political negotiation, acted quickly and decisively. That level of readiness helps explain why China's next steps in space are unfolding with increasing confidence. China's next move. Planned for launch in 2026, possibly as early as August, Chang'e 7 represents a measured step toward the next stage of lunar exploration. Its main objective is clear and focused: to determine whether usable water ice exists inside the Moon's permanently shadowed craters, and to measure how much is there. Answering this question would clarify both the Moon's long-term history and the practical limits of sustaining human and robotic activity on its surface. The mission targets regions where sunlight never reaches and temperatures regularly fall below -100 degrees Celsius. Areas such as Shackleton Crater are believed to preserve water ice that has remained unchanged since the early solar system. These locations have long been out of reach, as they are too dark for solar-powered vehicles, too steep for safe landings, and too hostile for conventional probes. Chang'e 7 is explicitly designed to operate within these constraints. A key feature of the mission is a small hopping probe, powered by short rocket bursts, that can move from sunlit terrain into deep shadow. This probe is intended to access crater interiors directly, bypassing the limitations of wheeled rovers and fixed landers. It carries a single instrument, the water molecule and hydrogen isotope analyzer, which will perform the first direct measurements of water content inside permanently shadowed regions. By moving between illuminated and dark areas, the hopper allows the mission to study locations that have never been examined up close. Chang'e 7 is not a single spacecraft, but a coordinated system made up of 4 distinct elements with a combined mass of about 8,200 kilograms. Launched aboard a Long March 5 rocket from Wenchang, the mission is expected to operate for at least 8 years. Each component is designed to perform a specific role, while sharing data and support to build a complete picture of the lunar South Pole. The orbiter serves as the mission's survey platform. From orbit, it will map the region in great detail using imaging and radar systems to assess surface conditions and guide surface operations. Neutron and gamma-ray spectrometers aboard the orbiter will search for water ice across broad areas, placing local measurements into a wider regional context. This global perspective ensures that surface findings can be accurately interpreted. On the surface, the lander acts as the operational center. It is designed to touch down on a sunlit ridge near Shackleton Crater using a new precision landing system. The lander carries environmental sensors and a seismometer to study surface conditions and internal lunar activity. It also supplies power, manages communications, and coordinates the work of the rover and hopping probe. The rover, developed from the U-2 design, functions as the mission's mobile surface explorer. Equipped with lunar-penetrating radar, it can examine subsurface layers hundreds of meters below ground, revealing buried structures and possible ice deposits. Its Raman spectrometer identifies surface minerals, helping scientists reconstruct the geological history of the South Polar region. The rover's steady movement across the terrain complements the lander's fixed measurements and the hopper's targeted excursions. The hopping probe completes the system by entering permanently shadowed craters that no other component can reach. Its design allows it to land on sloped and uneven terrain and to collect direct data on the presence of water ice. This capability turns previously inaccessible regions into areas of direct study, filling a major gap in lunar exploration. Beyond its focus on water ice, Chang'e 7 carries 21 scientific instruments aimed at building a comprehensive understanding of the South Pole. These instruments will study surface conditions, landforms, internal structure, magnetic fields, and thermal behavior. The mission will also observe Earth's space environment from the Moon, providing data relevant to future lunar and deep space operations. The mission also serves as a testbed for technologies needed for long-term activity in polar regions. These include landmark-based navigation for accurate landings, shock absorption systems for the hopping probe, and vertically mounted solar panels designed to capture low-angle sunlight. Chang'e 7 also includes instruments from 6 international partners: Russia, Italy, Switzerland, Egypt, Bahrain, and Thailand, reflecting a broader collaborative approach. Chang'e 7 is a central part of the 4th phase of China's lunar exploration program and a key step toward the planned International Lunar Research Station in the 2030s. By identifying and measuring water ice deposits, the mission will provide data needed for resource use, surface planning, and sustained human presence. The results will guide future landing choices, energy systems, and operational strategies. Rather than marking a symbolic milestone, Chang'e 7 is designed to support long-term activity, signaling a shift from short missions toward permanent use of the lunar South Pole. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.